All right, everybody, what's going on? Welcome to another installment of Things That Keep Me Up at Night podcast. You can see some handsome gentlemen joining me. We are joined by producer Greg. What's going on? He's going to be helping us out with these streams going forward. Also, the man of the hour is truly Chris, who, when we talk about what we're going to talk about, it will make sense why he's here. So there is something going on here in LA. It's kind of developing, happened just outside of LA County, or maybe just within LA County. A Brinks truck was looted of $150 million worth of jewelry, watches, gems. There's some discrepancies within the story. Again, it's developing. But instead of me just blathering on about it and complaining to Greg about how could this happen, this is so interesting, I figured, you know what, let's get someone who's actually in the industry to give us some insight on, number one, what it's like being an armored car guard, but also what could have happened in this situation. So Chris, who are you and why are you here?
My name is Chris, former armored car guard. I was a Marine before that. Actually, I was in college before that, and then I graduated and ran out of money, which is what led to the armored car job. I worked that for 3 years, from 2012 to 2015. I was just a regular guard, and then I was a supervisor for a little while until I pissed off the boss, and then I was a regular guard again. And then I have moved on to working with the government, which is why I prefer to remain anonymous. I don't do anything super secret squirrel, but I'd still rather just, not put myself out there.
Totally get it. Well, as we were saying before we jumped on the recording, any perspective, any insight, super duper valuable, because I'm going to speak for Greg. He's never worked for an armored car company. I've never worked for an armored car company. So, why is this even on my radar? Well, number one, Greg and I are both out of Los Angeles. So this happened here in LA, but also because I personally am in the wristwatch industry. I'm a watch dealer. I'm a jeweler. So this is very, very interesting. Again, as I've said over and over again, this is a developing story and the FBI is now involved. But to me, my understanding or my only real experience interacting with armored cars is when I'm at some establishment like a Starbucks, and then one of those trucks rolls in. Then there's some dude with the duffel bag and the plate carrier, and he has his hand, typically on his sidearm, walking in, walks behind the counter, it gets filled up, he goes directly back into the truck, and then they leave. Like, these dudes are very point A to point B. They don't dilly-dally. They're not there to have conversations with people. I get it, because they're holding a lot of valuable items. But what doesn't make sense to me is, according to every report that I can see, I believe it was in San Mateo, right, Greg? That they were coming from NorCal, I think just around San Francisco. And they were supposed to be driving down to the Pasadena Convention Center. For those of you who aren't familiar with California, Pasadena is a suburb of Los Angeles. And somewhere, I believe it was on the 5 freeway at a rest stop, the truck was empty. So Chris, how does this happen? How is a truck left unattended enough for there to be an opportunity for things to get stolen? And even if the truck is left unattended, isn't it like literally a mobile safe? Like, isn't it locked up?
Yeah. So just to go with the basics of the truck, to get that out of the way, it is a mobile safe. Without getting too into the technicals of it, the trucks we used were dimple locks. And what that is how the key you put in your front door has a bunch of ridges and rises and all that. Mm-hmm. They don't do that because it's easy to bypass, easy to pick. There's stuff out there you can open any lock depending on the manufacturer in under 30 seconds.
Right.
What they do now is dimple locks. It's basically just think of a large key with a series of holes drilled into it.
Mhm.
And that is harder to bypass. Not impossible. If you've got like 30 minutes, a popsicle stick, and the aluminum off a stick of gum, you can
Right.
make an impression, but that's 30 minutes.
Right.
And they're basically designed. When the company I worked at, what they said was 8 minutes. We want you out of the truck, in a stop, and out within 8 minutes, because they believed 8 minutes was the time. Even if you had a welder, sledgehammer,
Mhm.
anything, 8 minutes. So if for some reason both of you were out of the truck, which is not supposed to happen, but they're saying even if the truck was unattended, you should still have 8 minutes. So that's the truck.
So
For what?
Greg pulled up an image or some images of a dimple lock. So I have some further questions kind of about this. So 8 minutes. I assume that some type of I mean, I work in business, so I assume you guys have different jargon, but like sure there was some form of market research, some analysis done that got them to that number, like 8 minutes in and out. That seems to be plausible. Although, sometimes things are just chosen arbitrarily. Um, what what are they expecting to be the biggest vulnerability during a day's work, right? So first of all, I guess I should ask, what are the typical duties of an armored car, and when or what is the kind of scariest part, the most vulnerable part, the part where you are potentially bottlenecked in some way? When do you guys show your soft underbelly the most?
I would say, well, what we do is we go to locations, typically retail, and pick up their day's take, because it's thousands of dollars. They don't want to bring it to the bank themselves, because where we have moments where we're a soft underbelly, they're just entirely made up of nothing but soft underbelly.
Right.
So we pick up retail. We also restock cash machines. When a tech has to go out and fix a cash machine, we actually will go out there and stand guard, because even though the tech doesn't have access to the vault, people don't know that usually. So they'll try to rob the tech and be like, "Give me the money," when he says he can't open it. They don't.
Right.
That's basically the gist of it. The company I work for, we picked up the New York Thruway, so all the tolls, so
Oh
lots of
wow.
coin, stuff like that. So it was the shorter routes, you had about 30 stops in the day. The larger routes, you could have 65, 70.
So when would you say, or I guess when would the higher up say, that 8 minute mark really mattered? Like when are you most vulnerable? I assume when the doors open and you're walking out, right? Or is
Yeah,
it the actual driving part that gets sketchy?
no, driving part is you're probably the safest, because you are, 3 tons of death if somebody tries
Right,
to do
right,
anything.
right, right, right.
We would talk amongst like, oh, the thing is, if somebody's getting robbed, the truck is supposed to drive away. That was the
Mm.
policy. It's what's supposed to happen. And I always told them, I said, listen, guys, if you're getting robbed and I drive away, don't worry, I'm circling around. Just be sure to jump out of the way when I hit the guy with the truck. But I'd say the most vulnerable part, there's two. Um, when you're at a big stop and you're loading up out of the back, because the
Okay.
smaller stops, you can just grab the bag, open the door, you're walking. Bigger stuff, you've got to get a hand truck, you've got to load everything, the door is open, you've got your back to it. Your partner's supposed to be staying up front with the truck in case you get robbed. He's supposed to drive away. So
Mhm.
that's when you're loading a big load, that's when you're most vulnerable. And also when you're loading an ATM, because the typical
Mm.
ATM around here, the smaller ones you might see in a little deli or something, those typically hold 10, 20, $30,000. The ones you see in front of banks, in my experience, each one's $160,000.
Gosh,
Yeah. So,
Greg, we're in the wrong business.
so you've got to, and you and your partner do work together on it, but still both of your backs are turned. You're trying to get in and out.
Right.
That was one thing I prided myself is as long as everything worked out and the computer tech that's literally from the 1990 that they still use in all the ATMs, as long as that all worked out, I could get an ATM done in 3 minutes.
Wow.
And partially because, personal pride, but also we're vulnerable. Let's get this done, get the hell out of here.
Right. I'm going to ask you about any personal hairy situations, but real quick, I'll never forget. I was driving down. I used to live off of Miracle Mile, Wilshire, kind of mid city, and there was a Wells Fargo, I believe, ATM, and I was walking down the street by the apartment that I lived in at the time, and a Brinks truck pulled up. The back door swings open. 3 guys get out. 2 of them go start working on the ATM, and one dude rolls out with like a shotgun, like holding a 12 gauge. And I was like, I've never witnessed this. I've never seen them be so on guard. And I'm wondering, is that normal for someone to be covering their backs with 2 guys working on the ATM, or do you think that something led them to kind of be more cautious in that situation?
I think there's a couple possibilities. The company I worked at, we were always 2-man crews. We never had 3.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that there was either something had happened within the region. There was a string of stuff, and they just put an extra guy out just to be safe, as you say, just to roll out, give that good presence.
Mm-hmm.
The other possibility is, if you've seen the movie The Town.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, The Town is probably the best representation of armored car guards, because you got the one guy who just wants to read the paper, but then you have the other guy who's just super hua and super motivated, and they're like, this guy's a problem because he's a tool,
Mm-hmm.
And the possibility, like, you get a lot of that. You get a lot of pseudo cops and wannabes. So the possibility is that the guy with the shotgun just wanted to look cool, and it just happened to work out.
I mean,
it looked extra secure.
There's all the psychology that I'm sure you, being a Marine, you're well read on, but the whole hard target, soft target thing, and just sometimes being there, like as that kind of show of force, it definitely worked for me, because I was like some 20 something walking down the street, and I was like, wow, probably not going to mess with these dudes, because this guy literally has his gun in his hand.
Yeah.
Now, speaking about guns, I remember this was years ago. There was an AMA on Reddit, and it was about, I believe it was a Brinks truck, actually. He was like, Brinks truck operator here, ask me anything. And one of the most shocking things that I read during that AMA was, he said, listen, every Brinks truck is supposed to have a 12 gauge inside of it. 90% don't. And I was like, wait, so how confident should we be in these people's ability to defend valuables? So you being on the inside, and I know you probably can't speak to like every agency or every business's protocols or SOPs or whatever, but as someone who was in this industry, generally speaking, how confident can we, the public, be that armored car guards are like truly guarding the stuff?
Well, let me think. It's a lot like, they're not really, if they get robbed, the protocol was for us, and I'm pretty sure this is the same protocol for everywhere else, is you give them the money and you don't resist.
Right.
The guns aren't there to protect the money. The money's insured. The guns are there to protect you, and the general public is there in danger. As for guarding them, if a situation happened and the guards had to react, just in my experience, in my company, I would take half with me to a firefight, and I would not want the other half with me. That's just in my experience.
Right.
I can't speak for everyone.
So, okay, we're gonna get to the story here soon. So, Greg, cue up one of the articles. There's a plethora, but real quick, Chris, have you personally, or have you heard of anybody in your business or former business, been in a sticky situation? Like, okay, this looks like it could be bad. This looks like it's getting it's wigging me out. Or have you ever? This is, oh my god, this is such a juvenile question. Have you ever had to pull your gun on someone? Have you ever been in that scenario as an armored car guard?
So I pulled my gun 3 times.
Okay.
In a situation. One of them was, there's this area, I don't know how familiar you are with the New York Hudson Valley region.
Yeah.
But north of the city, there's Mount Vernon. And Mount Vernon is not the best of neighborhoods. And we were delivering to a check cashing place. And the thing with check cashing places is they get regular deliveries, but they also get extra deliveries around the same time that benefit checks are issued. So twice a month, you're putting in $500,750,000, So, you're heavy that day.
Right.
So we're going, and the partner I was with is, I would say he's part of that half that I would not want to have with me in a firefight.
Great.
So we're getting ready to go out, and I'm like, hey man, just be on your toes. It's kind of crowded today. We're heavy. And he's like, no, it's okay, guy. You see that guy over there? And I look over and I just see a guy, and I'm like, yeah. He's like, it's okay. I buy DVDs from that guy. If anything's going to happen, he's going to let me know. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. You see that guy? And I point over to him. He's like, yeah, fuck that guy. He will rob you in a heartbeat. So we get out of the truck, and he's starting to load everything. And this is one of the times where I was like, no, we just shut the truck up. We're both going in, because I didn't trust the situation. And we get out and we draw a crowd, because it is a lot of money. And everyone starts asking questions. And I just drew my pistol, held it down with the low ready. And I said, everyone, can you please back up? And they backed up. And, the stop went fine. Everything was fine. But it was just a thing of, I think if my partner was a little more on the ball, I wouldn't have had to do that. But I kind of felt like I need to calm the situation down immediately. And I think presentation of force is the thing that'll do it.
Right. Preemptive. You did it before it got bad.
Exactly. The second one was because it just seems to be a recurring theme. My partner was an idiot. So we were driving through White Plains, which is, it can be a little tight. And we were going through, and my partner was a terrible, terrible driver. And we were driving one of the smaller trucks, and he cuts a guy off. And I didn't think anything of it, because he cut people off all the time. But this guy took exception. So we're going, we make a turn. We're heading towards, I think, the mall. And the other dude scoots around us, goes across the thing, blocking us. Mind you, he's in like a Ford, like Ranger, a Ranger truck, and we're in the 2-ton vehicle. We could just plow through this guy like we didn't even know. But insurance. So my partner stops, and this guy's at hem and haw and yelling. And I just opened the truck, took my weapon out, didn't point it at him, but a general direction towards the ground. And I just yelled out, "Are you robbing us?" And he just stops it. "No." "Are you sure?" And he just gets in the truck and drives away.
Good.
And the third instance was, I think it was White Plains again, but it was the train station. You can actually look this up. So we were there one day, and you ever just looked at a guy and just immediately thought, that guy's crazy? You ever just have that
I live in Los Angeles. It's like a daily occurrence.
Yeah, like you can either look at the most beautiful woman in the world or the craziest guy in the world, and you make that decision every 5 minutes. That's basically what it was. So I just look at this dude, and I'm like, that guy's nuts. And my partner, the same one who cut off the other guy the other day, this time I was driving, he looks at me and he says, "Can you keep an eye on that guy?" And I was like, good, we're on both same one. This guy's bad news. So he goes into the train station to pick up the money, and we watch this guy. I'm watching this guy, and he starts circling the truck, just walking around. You know, he didn't. I could tell he didn't have anything on him, but he was just being weird, circling the truck. And I'm watching him. He goes around, and I watch him in the mirror, and he like ducks away because he can see I can see him in the mirror. So he's trying to like make it so I can't see him anymore. So I keep an eye on him, and at this point, I just pull out my gun and I just rest it on the steering wheel. And when he came around, he looked up and he saw it, and he was like, "Oh!" and he just walked away.
It's all it needs, man.
Yeah, all the presentation. The next day, a girl got pushed onto the train tracks at that train station. So we couldn't pick up. We were like, oh, it was all police, everything. So we skipped it. And then I look up the news story the next day and they show the guy's mugshot. It was the same guy. It was that guy who was scoping out our truck, pushed a girl onto the train tracks. So yeah, that was my 3 instances of my, I had to draw my weapon because things just weren't right.
Right. So, okay. Luckily, you were never actually robbed, though.
No.
Have you ever heard of that happening?
Not with my company, not directly. The only real big thing I heard about was, okay, so you go up to an ATM and let's say you want $200 and you put it in there, but you only have 120 in your bank account.
Right.
As long as nothing's changed in the last, 7 years, when you put that in and you get declined, you're still going to hear the machine whirl. That
Right.
money goes into a separate thing. It's still accounted for, the money that you wanted, even though it's not pulling it out. It goes into this thing called divert. So there was this guy who worked for the company for years. I mean, like more than 15 years. And apparently this guy thought divert was free money. So he would do everything else. And then and sometimes divert can be, if there's like a problem with the machine, divert can be thick.
Right.
And apparently he was just like doing the machine, doing whatever. And then he would just pocket the divert money because he thought it was free. And after all this time that he worked there, they figured out what was going on. And like I said, it was more than 15 years. So this guy probably got thousands, if not, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So that's literally an example of an inside job.
Yeah. An inside job with the guy was an idiot.
And so this kind of brings us to the story, because I've alluded to this on the Time Teller channel. We spoke about how this pertains to watches somewhat tangentially, but I mean, according to one of the articles that I have here, there were Rolexes, there were Frank Muller watches, and Cartiers. I read one report that there might be Richard Mille watches in there.
Ooh.
But regardless of which watchmakers, there were clearly expensive things in that truck. Okay. I'm going to read from one article, the New York Post article. New details emerge in California thieves' $150 million Ocean's 11 style jewel heist. Now, when you hear Ocean's 11 style, that it makes it seem like very grandiose and almost glamorous, like, ooh, okay, there's dudes in suits and they have different teams and this person's going to be here, and then there's going to be a diversion, and then there's going to be someone slowly lowered down on a bungee cord, like Mission Impossible style, and then this and that. I don't know what they actually mean by that, because when I read this, it doesn't really like signal Ocean's 11 vibes, aside from it just being a ton of money. Greg, I don't know if you want to pull up the New York Post article, but new details emerged. Ocean's 11 style heist of Brinks armored truck in California that netted up to $150 million in jewels, including the priceless gems. Okay, let's see. It happened at a Flying J travel stop from San Mateo to Pasadena. So yeah, it was in between there. They did leave San Mateo on Sunday night, July 11th, destined for Los Angeles and the Pasadena Convention Center, and sometime the next morning they were robbed. Interesting. Yeah, there were a large number of Rolex, Cartier, Frank Muller watches. These are luxury watches that sell 10,000 and up. I don't know who did that valuation, but they're, much more than 10,000 usually. Former FBI agent Rick Smith told ABC it's unlikely any Brinks worker was involved in the sensational robbery, which could have been a scene taken from the famed Ocean's heist flick franchise. He says, I doubt that a Brinks employee is involved in something like this. It's too obvious. Okay, again, nothing really kind of denotes Ocean 11 aside from the fact that it's just very, very expensive. It's a whole lot of money. So I guess my question to you, Chris, is that I feel like I am a layman. I'm a layperson when it comes to this industry, right? I'm also not a thief, so I don't really know how they would think. But as just like a person using Occam's razor, I would be led to believe that it has to be an inside job, right? I mean, who knows what's in the truck? Who knows the timeline? Who knows where the stuff is? Who knows how to get rid of the stuff? The people in the truck. So for the former FBI agent to say it's unlikely because it's too obvious, the fact that it's so obvious, doesn't that make it a possibility? Doesn't that make it like the number one possibility? And if not, what scenarios could there be? So I'm gonna hand you the mic, Chris. What do you personally think happened, and what are some potential other occurrences that could have happened that led to $150 million worth of goods just vanishing?
Firstly, I always say if the law enforcement's on the news and they're telling you something, there's a reason they're putting that out there. I feel like they're saying that on purpose. So whoever, they think it's an inside job, so they're trying to make them think it's not, so they'll slip up. That's my opinion.
So the perpetrators think that no one's on their trail.
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense.
I think there was some famous case in the 80s or 90s where somebody got kidnapped. They got paid the ransom money, and they found the kidnappers because the guy immediately went and bought a Porsche or something or a Ferrari. So they're kind of hoping for that. Right. But what I think happened and is most likely is an inside job. I don't think it was the guys in the truck. They might have had some knowledge, but I don't think they were like the main people.
Okay.
What I think it was an inside job, most likely a former employee. Because even if you want to go with the sensational thing of Ocean's 11, what was the big thing that they did a lot in the Ocean's 11 movie? They stole the key.
Right.
So if you're a former employee, you're going to know the policies, the procedures. You know how long. I'm assuming they were at the truck stop to get gas and go to the bathroom and all that. You know how long that's going to take. You know how long those two people on that particular run, you know how long they take in the bathroom because you've been with them for so long.
But is there ever any instance in which the armored car is like totally unattended? You'd think they'd rotate, right? You'd think one person would stay.
It's not supposed to be,
Mhm.
but it happens because to get back to something earlier, the weakest part of the armored car industry and the security industry in general is the people.
Right.
You know, people got to go to the bathroom. People are lazy. People want to get home fast. You know, whatever. It's the people. So you got a guy like, oh, I'm gonna go get snacks, and then his buddy, the driver, is like, well, I got to go to the bathroom. I don't want to wait. You know, he might pop out.
Right.
So that's that. So one thing with my company is, even if, and this happened quite often, is like I said, there's not supposed to be two people out of the truck, but when you find it, it's because they lock themselves out.
Right.
And that happens all the time. And that means that there are always spare keys in the office. And in the case of the company I worked at, there are many spare keys. Why? I don't know, but there were. So if there's a former employee who has access to those, who knows where they are, even if you want to get grandiose and sci-fi, they might know the bidding, which is like the depth of the cut on the dimple keys. If he knows that, it's not out of the
to make a dupe
possibility to just make a key.
Right.
Or some of these locks, I doubt it, but some of them you can just, if you buy the lock you buy the key. So,
Mhm.
you can either, do something. So
So
I think it was an inside job. I think it was probably either a former employee or a guy who had the day off, and
so
he knew they were going to be out of the truck, opened it, grabbed them, left.
here's here is an interesting facet about the story though. None of the articles I've been able to read, I don't know if Greg's seen one, chime in if you have, Greg. Um, I haven't seen a single story mentioning where the drivers were or what came of the drivers. Like literally, there's not a single article right now, as of yet, that has
And
mentioned, oh, the drivers were inside, the drivers were unharmed, or the drivers were taken hostage, or the drivers were confronted at the rest stop with firepower, or like, oh, there was an altercation between the guard and this. No, there's like literally no mention of it, which kind of leads me to believe the way the articles are written, it leads the reader to believe that the truck was literally just emptied and found empty. Like that's, they don't mention anything else. So what I'm trying to figure out is like, did the guards just straight up like take the bags and run? But then yeah, I suppose that would be too obvious, wouldn't it?
So what I saw actually was they had 27 minutes in two articles that the truck was left in the parking lot. So
That's almost half an hour.
yeah, so what you said, Chris, was like, something about 8 minutes or something like that to, uh, you know, do your job. It's like they obviously left a lot more time for somebody to go in and get the truck. Like a truck probably shouldn't be left for 27 minutes at a rest stop. So they didn't say anything that happened to them. They just said that the truck was left for 27 minutes.
That
then in the
sounds
original
fishy.
article, I believe it said that they delivered the rest of the stuff. So
Interesting.
personally, I don't think they realized it until they got to Pasadena, and then they opened the truck and were like, oh, there's a lot of stuff missing. I think
What
that was
the
in one of the
heck?
articles I read.
Dude, this is bringing me down to like another rabbit hole of like the Jeffrey Epstein stuff. Like it just so happens the camera like wasn't working at that time, and it just so happens both guards were like taking a little snooze, and it's just like coincides perfectly. It's just like, and so in this case, the Brinks truck parks at a rest stop. Just so happens the guards took a little bit longer of a break than they should have, and then they show up where they're supposed to go, and oops, we're light. We're a bit light, guys. We're a bit light to the tune of $150 million. It's I don't know, man. And the fact that they would immediately come out and be like, yeah, it's just too obvious that they'd be in on it. Who else would it be? You're gonna tell me there's some cat burglar, some uh, Catherine Zeta-Jones in that movie with Sean Connery? Remember where she has to like duck through the lasers and she's like,
Entrapment.
yeah, you're gonna tell me that like there's one of those going out in the dead of the night? Because apparently, according to the articles, again, Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, it happened around like 2:30 a.m. So it's like in the middle of the night at this rest stop. There's some like sexy. I want to believe she's sexy, like a Catherine Zeta-Jones, black jumpsuit, going through the lasers, picking the lock, stealing the stuff, throwing it into, I don't know, it would be a sexy car, like a matte black Aventador, and just zooms down the five. I don't think that's what happened. I think that these dudes who were the drivers left a little tip to someone else and was like, hey, we gotta go to we're gonna be at this Flying J at around 2:30, and my buddy and I are gonna have food poisoning, and we're gonna use the toilets for about just under 30 minutes. So why don't you go ahead and take a look? We may or may not have left a spare key somewhere. Yeah, that's I don't know. That's what I think. Greg, you can chime in. You know what?
Yeah, I mean,
This is what we'll do. That's my take. I think it was inside job. Greg, what is your take? And then we'll finish up with Chris.
all right. So I got an interesting take here. So I did a bit of reading on this, and it sounds like there's a lot of stuff going on. For one, the big part of this was the jewelry was going to a convention, and these are jewelers that put all their jewelry in these trucks and have them transported everywhere. It's their
Mhm.
huge amount. But clearly, this stuff's on the calendar. Like, obviously, like, people would know this and whatnot. And it says insurance here was $10 million, right? These guys claimed less than probably what it was actually worth. And the
Which
reason
is
for
not uncommon in the jewelry world.
no,
Just
not
some
at all.
inside baseball.
And
That's pretty common.
exactly. And the reason, sometimes for that is because prices go up and, costs more to insure. So think about it. Brinks might be a little pissed off about that. So, like, there's people there that are like, they're gypping us on the insurance, blah, blah. They, $150 million worth of jewelry in here, but they're only saying it's 10 million. So I could see Brinks being a little pissed off about it too. And just, people internally, take advantage of that, and it just so happens to disappear. And that's what it seemed to happen here. Like, the story seems totally made up. Like, 2:30 in the morning, leaving for 27 minutes.
Random truck
just
stop.
a random truck stop. Like, makes no sense. Like, it definitely seems like it was set up, and they're literally just trying to they're trying to play dumb and avoid it. So I think it's an inside job too. I just think there's way too much. There's probably some other conspiracy internally that's going on as well, just having to do with all these numbers and stuff, which kind of makes sense. And just the environment right now in LA is just like there's crime everywhere. So I just,
it's crazy.
It was bound to happen, but I just found it very interesting. It probably is internally, and they're just going to blame it on external factors, like, oh yeah, we just got robbed. So that's my take.
I think the crazy thing is I was checking the channel's PO box, because I mean we regularly get shipments, and there was this Metro cop on a motorcycle. He pulled up and he was walking in. He had a stack of mail. He was probably just like going on his shift, and he wanted to stop at the post office. And just randomly I had the urge to like ask him about this, because I knew that I had just gotten off the phone with Greg, and we were just scheduling this podcast, and it was on like the front of my mind. And I see this cop, and I just had to, as if he would have any insight. But I was like, officer, he was like, what's going on? And I was like, did you hear about the Brinks heist? And he goes, oh yeah, the one heading to Pasadena. And I was like, yeah. He goes, inside job. And I'm like, for sure? And he's like, yeah, I'm not investigating it, but inside job. And I was like, oh yeah, okay, well, yeah, that's that seems to be the common consensus.
Yeah.
So yeah. So okay. Final point, Chris. Are we gonna include you in our camp of rallying against the narrative? This must be an inside job. Chris, agree or disagree? What say you?
I absolutely agree. And I'll raise up another point as you were talking, and this will go more to your expertise as well. So Richard Mille watch. I mean, they're going for what, $1 million each, more.
Yeah.
Are you going to store that in a bag, a little canvas bag that has a dollar sign on the side with a whole bunch of other things?
Yeah.
No, it's going to be in like big Pelican cases and stuff like that, right? It's going to be these big bulky cases. So whoever took this stuff, they didn't just grab like a bag and left. They were ready for a lot of big bulky containers, and that's somebody who has prior knowledge, prior experience, and they know what they need. So yeah, inside job.
You actually on the emails exchanged before we set up this podcast, you mentioned something very, very interesting. Greg, I don't know if you have anything queued up for this, but Chris, you mentioned how there's an actual mechanical vulnerability within these armored vehicles, where if you take a turn too fast, a part of the truck can literally open up. Can you go into any more detail about that?
Yeah, I sent Greg a photo of a truck I was in that crashed, and it'll show you the side door. I don't think this is a universal thing. Like I said, the company I worked at was a little rinky dink. They were a little light on the maintenance of the trucks. So, but mechanical failure is a possibility.
Okay.
A lot of the trucks have side doors with steps in them. Now, you're not supposed to put anything in the side door with the steps. It's just supposed to help with the ease of getting in and out of the truck, or
Right.
when you pull up to a bank, instead of getting out of the back, you can open the side door and go directly into the door. It's supposed to help out with that. But, people are lazy. And those steps are right at like hip height. So if you just go over, pop the door, you don't have to finagle things. You can just open it right up.
Right.
So, and what happened to me personally is I was in the truck and we just picked up, or we just delivered to a Home Depot. I'm going around and, the Home Depot parking lot's pretty empty. So I'm kind of whipping the truck around and I heard the clunk of an actuation and I look and the side door just opened by itself. I guess I took the turn too hard and I'm not mechanically minded. I don't know if it was a solenoid or whatever, but I just see bags of quarters just tumbling out into the parking lot. And fun fact, a bag of 1,000 quarters is 54 pounds. So we had to turn around, go get those, fix all that. And after that, I threw everything in the back. But there is the possibility that there was some kind of mechanical issue. Door popped open. And, driving down at highway speeds, these trucks are loud. If they had stored something in the side door, it popped open. They took a turn, it popped open, stuff fell out. Door closed. It's possible they didn't even hear it. And be honest, if you were driving down the highway and you saw a case full of Rolexes, are you going to tell anyone? No, I'm going to pick it up, throw it in my trunk, and I'm going to be on.
Well, here's the difficult thing. Those are all serialized. All the watches have serial numbers. So it's like
who checks serial numbers on eBay?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right. And most people that are selling blur out the serial numbers anyway. So it's crazy. But this has been very eye-opening. I think that we're all on the same page. I urge the viewers, whoever's watching this on YouTube, to leave a comment and please rally against the common narrative. They want us to believe that it's not an inside job. I think it was 100% an inside job. My producer thinks it's an inside job, and Chris, the man himself, who was in this industry, agrees that it was probably an inside job. Could there have been some mechanical failure? Potentially. I think that would take more steps to explain than simply it was an inside job. Like, again, Occam's razor, whichever takes the least steps to explain is probably the answer. And having some greedy people who are underpaid, overworked, they have an opportunity to make a big trip, and there's a whole lot of things they can steal. Tip someone off, take a extended break, someone comes in, scoops up the truck, and no one's any wiser. So that's what I think happened. Again, comment section, viewers, listeners, sound off. Let us know what you think. Now, Chris, there's something I like to do on this podcast. Doesn't have to pertain to the story, doesn't have to pertain to anything that we spoke about today. What's some advice you would give the viewer at home? Anything. Life advice, personal advice, financial advice? No, anything. What would you like to say? And I know this is a deep question, kind of a tall order, but I do this to everyone that comes on the podcast. What's some final departing advice that you would like to say?
As someone who's been in hairy situations, both overseas and then over here, financially, personally, and all that, I'll paraphrase from one of my favorite books. It's the Kane series by Matthew Stover. Any progress is progress. It doesn't matter if you move 10 miles a day or an inch. So if things are bad, just keep your head down and inch towards daylight.
Amen. That was incredible. Thank you. Well, Chris, thank you so much for joining us. Honestly, kind of short notice. Again, this podcast is in its infancy. So I really do appreciate you scheduling with us. I couldn't have done this episode without having someone in this industry, and you were the expert of the day. So thank you so much. Round of applause for Chris. Round of applause for producer Greg. Thank you. All the help that I'm getting here, I really do appreciate it. And guys, there you have it. Another episode of Things That Keep Me Up at Night. Please consider supporting us on Patreon because as of right now, we're not monetized. Click the link in the description below. And yeah, subscribe to the YouTube channel, Things That Keep Me Up at Night. And we will catch you on the next one. Stay happy, stay healthy, stay blessed, and just love each other. And if you find some Rolexes on the side of the I-5 freeway, let me know. All right. I will catch you guys later. Peace.